Hello everyone. Tonight we find ourselves stepping right into the muck, literally, of a medieval siege camp. Imagine this, it's just before dawn. The sky is a muddy grey, and you're standing ankle deep in a field that was once grass, but now resembles a soup made of mud, urine, and broken dreams. The camp stretches out in all directions, tents sagging like defeated sails, smoke curling lazily from cook fires that smell suspiciously like boiled shoes, and the distant thunk of a trebuchet test, launching a cow carcass. And that's just your welcome party. Before you settle in, take a second to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy the stories. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. It's always a joy watching Bedtime wander the globe. So, get comfy, blanket, pillow, whatever helps, and let's drift into tonight's story together. Now back to the pit you've just stumbled into. You're new here, and it shows. Your clothes are still vaguely clean, your boots aren't soaked through yet, and you haven't acquired the telltale siege funk, a pungent blend of unwashed armpit, foot rot, and despair. You ask someone where the commander is. A grizzled veteran points with a thumb, while chewing something unidentifiable. That way. Try not to step in the, too late. You look down. Yep, that's definitely human waste. Possibly yesterday's gruel, maybe both. You're not sure which is worse. Let's be clear. This isn't the glamorous side of medieval warfare. There's no gleaming armour, no gallant duels. Siege warfare is the slow, grinding, grotesque sibling of battlefield glory. It's trench digging, boredom, disease, and the constant threat of being pelted with flaming tar. Your barracks is a crowded little wedge of canvas draped over wooden poles. It leaks, it flaps in the wind, and it's already infested with fleas. You share it with 3 other men. One snores like a dying ox, one has a mysterious rash, and one insists on sleeping fully armoured, just in case. You'll learn not to ask. The camp itself is more like a temporary city, but if cities were made entirely out of refuse, shouting, and bad smells, there are designated zones for cooking, weapon storage, horses, and disposal. Only no one seems to respect the zoning rules. Now, let's talk about the ground. Siege camps are always set up just far enough away from the enemy castle to avoid direct arrow fire, but close enough to keep a good eye on things. Unfortunately, that means they're usually in fields or lowlands, perfect for accumulating water and muck. You sink with every step, your boots growing heavier as they absorb the wet earth and worse. Historians still argue whether some of the larger siege camps in France and the Holy Roman Empire were intentionally built in lowlands to demoralize the troops faster, or if it was just an unfortunate coincidence. Either way, your feet are paying the price. Everywhere you turn, someone's yelling, barked orders, panicked reports, accusations of theft, usually bread, and the occasional indecipherable cursing match in dialects you don't understand. There's a constant buzz of anxiety. People are afraid of illness, of starvation, of being volunteered for something dangerous. And you should be afraid too. One of the first things you notice is how many people are injured. Not from battle, but from camp life. Sprained ankles, infected cuts, shattered toes from mishandling siege engines. There's no such thing as a clean wound here. Even a scrape can turn into a death sentence if the wrong bacteria takes up residence. Did we mention the camp surgeon? His nickname is the Whisperer, not because he's gentle, but because he whispers to his tools before using them. You try not to think about it. As the sun begins to rise, fog curling like cigarette smoke across the damp earth, someone nearby retches violently. You glance over and see a man vomiting into a hole he's just dug for that exact purpose. The hole is filled with more vomit than dirt. There's a brief moment of peace when a church bell sounds in the distance from the town you're trying to starve. It rings out once, twice, mockingly. You catch the eyes of a nearby soldier who shrugs. They're praying for us to go away. You want to leave already, but you're stuck here, about that shelter
welcome to the siege.
You return to your tent, if it even qualifies as one. It's more of a damp triangle pretending to be a home. The fabric is coarse, scratchy, and has the tensile strength of boiled cabbage. There's a patch at the top sewn in with what appears to be horsehair and hope, and it leaks whenever clouds think about raining, which, lucky you, happens often. Inside, it smells like wet wool and socks that have dyed twice. Your assigned sleeping area is a bit of straw on canvas, soaked through and riddled with things that jump. You lie down for a moment, and something sharp pokes your back. You remove it. It's a tooth. You don't ask whose. If you're lucky, you have a tent at all. Some men are crammed under wagons, huddled under cloaks, or curled up beside their campfires. Others dig shallow pits and sleep inside them like angry potatoes. You begin to understand why siege camps were as deadly as battlefields. There's no comfort, no privacy, and definitely no heating. One fringe account from the Siege of Acre in the 12th century describes tents collapsing during a storm and being devoured by the earth, meaning they simply vanished into the mud. Historians still argue whether that's poetic exaggeration or literal quickmud. Either way, your boots are already sinking when you stand still too long. You glance at the adjacent tents. A night's retinue has a slightly better setup. Wooden posts, animal hide covering, even a makeshift bench. But you're not a knight. You're a grunt, a common soldier. If there's a medieval version of economy class, you're seated in it, with no legroom and rats as seatmates. Speaking of rats, they're everywhere. Fat, fearless, and oddly organised, they scramble over your boots, dart between sacks, and one makes direct eye contact with you while chewing a bit of dried beef that you were saving. It doesn't flinch. You back away. You decide to unpack what little you have. A wooden bowl, a coarse wool blanket that smells like goat, a dull knife, and a pouch of stale crumbs you try not to think of as your emergency dessert. That's it. That's your kingdom. Outside, two men argue over space. One claims the other stole half of his tent. You watch as it escalates into a slap, fight with wooden spoons, and then abruptly deflates when one of them remembers he has dysentery and walks away to handle it. Camp life is a constant test of patience, diplomacy, and bowel control. You try to make your area feel livable, hang the blanket, retie a corner of the canvas, shift the straw to the least wet patch. But it's like rearranging furniture on a sinking ship. At some point, you just surrender to the dampness. Then comes the wind. The medieval siege camp wind is not just air. It's a malicious force that knows exactly when you're trying to sleep. It howls through the gaps in your canvas like a banshee with indigestion. It throws soot from nearby fires directly into your eyes. It yanks open flaps and threatens to take the whole tent to the next county. You close your eyes and listen, not for sleep. Don't be ridiculous, but for what trouble might be coming. You hear someone snoring, someone else praying, hoofbeats in the distance, a dog barking, a man softly weeping, the creak of a siege engine being pulled into place. And just as you begin to drift into a light doze, a horn sounds. No, not an attack, just the cook signalling that it's time for the morning meal, or what passes for it. You groan, shove your boots back on, still wet, still full of mud, and brace for the next indignity. Breakfast in a medieval siege camp is not so much a meal as it is a psychological test. You follow the line of hollow-eyed soldiers toward the communal cookfire, stepping over discarded bones, broken clay pots, and at least one man sleeping with a chicken on his chest. The cook, an elderly man with 3 teeth and the disposition of a rabid badger, lifts a ladle from a massive cauldron and slops a steaming heap into your wooden bowl. You peer in. It's beige lumpy, suspiciously mobile. This is gruel, the official dish of military misery. Oats boiled in waters, or maybe rainwater collected from a horse trough, bulked up with whatever was left over from yesterday. Bits of onion, hunks of stale bread, and something chewy that might be jerky. Or hoof, you don't ask. You pick around in the slop and spot a beetle, a large one, still moving. A nearby soldier leans over and shrugs. Extra protein. He pops one in his mouth. Crunch. You suppress a gag and try to eat, because you have to. The day is long, and this may be your only sustenance until nightfall. The gruel tastes like sadness and slightly sour milk. You chew slowly, grateful for the heat, if not the flavour. Sometimes there's bread, though bread is generous. It's more like a brick of wheat, flavoured punishment. Dense, dry, and hard enough to chip a tooth, which someone behind you promptly does. You wince in sympathy as they spit the tooth into their bowl and keep chewing. If you're really unlucky, you're assigned to eat salted horse meat, tough, stringy, and so heavily brined that your lips pucker involuntarily. It's said that during the siege of Kenilworth in 1266, the meat was so salty, soldiers tried boiling it 3 times just to make it chewable. Historians still argue whether this was a form of intentional punishment or just poor logistics. Your breakfast conversation consists of burps, mild cursing, and speculation on what's growing on the gruel's surface. One man claims it's mould, another insists it's yeast blossom, the third calls it siege cheese, and offers to sell you some. You decline. Nearby, someone is already vomiting, whether from food, nerves, or illness, you don't know, and neither does he. No one flinches. No one even pauses. It's just another morning. You finish your meal, such as it is, and rinse your bowl in a bucket filled with grey, tepid water. You hand the bowl to a young boy who's been assigned dish duty. He takes it with a 1,000-yard stare, like someone who's seen things. Then comes the flatulence. Gruel, turns out, is not gentle on the digestive system. Across the camp, the symphony begins. Low rumbles, surprised puffs, mournful squeaks. Someone curses loudly, blaming the horse meat. One fringe account from a 15th century siege in Flanders describes the morning cookfire as a fog of stink and groaning bellies, thicker than the mists from the marsh. You believe it. You try to stand without alerting your bowels to mutiny. So far, so good. But now the real challenge begins: the long, cold walk to the latrine. There are few things in a medieval siege camp more feared than the latrine. The enemy's catapults. Sure, starvation, absolutely. But the latrine is personal. It's a pit, a trench, a hole, if it's anything at all, and it is never far enough away. You grab a torch, not because it's dark, it's mid-morning, but because you need something to keep the flies off. You follow a worn path behind the tents, past a pile of broken shields, and arrive at what generously might be called the sanitation area. It is a shallow ditch, surrounded by sad little stakes tied with scraps of cloth. Possibly a warning, possibly a failed attempt at decoration. You can smell it before you see it. A sour, meaty odour that sticks to your nostrils and follows you for hours. The ground squishes unpleasantly beneath your boots. There is no privacy, unless you count turning your back as privacy. A man squats 2 feet from you, humming tunelessly and making eye contact far too boldly. You wait awkwardly for him to finish, pretending to look at the clouds. He stands, adjusts his tunic, and cheerily advises, "Watch out for the left side. It caves in." Then he strolls off, whistling. You approach with dread. Your options are limited: squat and pray for balance, or hover and risk cramping. There's no toilet paper, just a communal rag nailed to a stick, nicknamed Old Crusty. You opt to use moss you found earlier. You will regret this decision. Scholars still argue whether medieval camps ever really enforced regular latrine construction rules, or if those edicts were just for show. Based on what you're seeing, and smelling. You'd guess the latter. You do your business while dodging flies, shielding your face with your elbow, and trying not to breathe. The earth shifts slightly under your feet. You finish quickly, and then comes the worst part, the cleanup. You use your moss gingerly and toss it into the trench. As you rise, your foot slips, and for a terrifying half-second, you think this is how it ends. Death by excrement, a soggy legacy. Fortunately, you catch yourself, but your boot sinks in up to the ankle. You do not look down. Back at camp, you try washing off at a communal basin. The water is grey and smells faintly of soup, but it's better than nothing. A man beside you rinses a wound on his arm, splashing blood into the basin. You decide you are clean enough. By now, you're beginning to understand why dysentery spreads faster than gossip in these camps. One moment of carelessness, one scratch with dirty fingers, and boom. 3 days later, you're a husk curled up in a flea-ridden blanket whispering to St. Jude. According to some chroniclers, during the siege of Antioch in 1097, the number of soldiers killed by disease vastly outnumbered those killed by combat, and one of the biggest culprits, latrines that overflowed into living quarters. A particularly bleak account describes tent floors turning to sewage slush during a storm. As you change socks, damp to slightly less damp, you begin to accept that everything here wants you dead. The food, the weather, the rodents, and yes, even the humble toilet ditch. You briefly daydream about going back home, your bed, a chamber pot, soap, but a horn blares again. Watch duty. Time to stand in the cold for hours, staring at a castle wall you'll never reach, while desperately hoping the enemy doesn't decide today's the day for boiling oil. You sigh, grab your spear, and head out. Maybe the lice won't bite as much if you keep moving. Watch duty sounds noble when described by bards and historians. Standing tall beneath fluttering banners, keeping vigilant guard against the enemy. In reality, it means standing very still for a very long time, in weather that actively hates you, while trying not to fall asleep, throw up, or get shot. You trudge out to the front lines of the siege camp, which isn't a line so much as a loosely defined muddy stretch. A few wooden palisades have been thrown up for cover, badly built, mostly splintered, and about as sturdy as a soggy bagayet. Your post is a flat stretch behind a cart, just out of crossbow range, probably. You plant your spear in the ground, lean on it, and begin the long, slow process of not doing anything while pretending you're very alert. Your job is to stare at the enemy castle. That's it, all day. A big, grey hunk of stone squatting on a hill, smug as a cat on a throne. Its walls are high, its gates closed, and its defenders are undoubtedly sipping wine and laughing about your breakfast. There's nothing to see, really. A few arrow slits, the occasional flutter of a banner. Once, a figure appears on the wall to relieve himself, and then vanishes. That's the highlight of your morning. You shuffle your feet to keep the blood flowing. It's cold, of course. Medieval cold. The kind that seeps through layers, settles in your bones, and makes your nose feel like it's been dunked in snowmelt. You try to blow into your hands, but your gloves are soaked and only spread the moisture around. Nearby, another guard hums tunelessly. A third one mutters prayers. A fourth is asleep, upright, with eyes barely open. You admire his technique. Then you hear a faint thwip. You blink. An arrow buries itself into the post 2 feet from your head. You freeze. A beat passes. Then another. You very slowly crouch behind the cart, your heart thudding like a war drum in your chest. Someone on the wall chuckles. You hear it. They're toying with you. Just a warning shot. Medieval psychological warfare, brought to you by boredom and sadism. According to records from the siege of Orleans, defenders would often take shots at enemy guards just to keep them on edge. Historians still argue whether it served any tactical purpose or was simply cruel entertainment. You vote for the latter. You inch back into your position, making sure the cart is between you and the castle. Your new strategy, surveillance from a safe, crouching posture, very tactical. As the hours drag on, you begin to nod off. Your eyes blur. You blink rapidly, then slap your own cheek. It doesn't help. You bite your tongue. That works. Barely. Medieval watch duty isn't just exhausting, it's dangerous. If the commander finds you asleep, the punishment ranges from a flogging to, well, execution. Yes, really. A sleeping guard might doom the entire camp, and nobody wants to die because you couldn't keep your eyes open. A rat scurries by. You consider naming it, something fancy. Maybe Sir Skitters. You follow his movements for a while. He's more active than you are. You see movement near the castle gate. A small door opens. A single figure steps out and relieves himself, then turns back. That's it. But your heartbeat triples. Any movement feels like an omen. You tighten your grip on your spear, knowing that if the gates burst open, your chances of surviving the first charge are approximately 0. You'd be trampled, gutted, or set on fire, and not necessarily in that order. Finally, the horn sounds. Shift change. You nearly cry from relief. You limp back to camp, feet frozen, legs aching, head foggy. No one thanks you for your service. Someone hands you a half-burnt turnip and says, "You're lucky they didn't fling a cow at us today." You nod. Yes, lucky indeed. You don't notice it at first. A sniffle here, a cough there. Everyone's tired, dirty, and vaguely sick. But as you settle in, it becomes horrifyingly clear disease isn't just present in the siege camp. It's throwing a banquet, and you're the main course. There's a man across from you with swollen eyes and a crusted nose, hacking into a rag that has clearly seen too many battles of its own. Another limps past with a leg wrapped in what looks like mouldy linen and prayers. One poor soul is lying motionless under a pile of cloaks, occasionally making a noise like a deflating bellows. Welcome to medieval camp medicine, mostly herbs, definitely superstition, and entirely ineffective. You feel an itch on your scalp. Then another. You scratch. Lice. You've got lice now. It didn't take long. They're the unofficial mascot of the siege, hopping from soldier to soldier, like party crashers, with no respect for personal space. You ask a nearby man what to do. He suggests vinegar and prayer. You ask if he has vinegar. He laughs and walks away. Dysentery is the big killer. Though, people call it the bloody flux, which sounds like a terrible metal band, but it's worse than that. It's violent diarrhea, dehydration, fever, and death, often within days. One account from the siege of Rouen mentions soldiers melting like wax by morning. Historians still debate whether those numbers were exaggerated to stir sympathy or simply grimly accurate. You can't escape it. The cook caught it last week. So did 3 members of your unit. You're told not to share bowls. But the washing water's all the same, and nobody's hands are clean. You start eyeing every bite of food like it's a dice roll. And then there's the trench mouth, ulcerated gums, bleeding sores, teeth falling out like they're giving up the fight. One man pulls a tooth mid, conversation and shrugs. More room for soup. He jokes. You don't laugh, you can't. Your stomach is rumbling, your throat feels scratchy, and now your eyes are starting to sting. Is it just smoke from the fire? Or something worse? You try to sleep off the panic, but rest is hard to come by. Someone is always coughing, always muttering, always groaning. In the tent next to yours, a man calls for his mother in 3 different languages. Another begs for water. No one has any. The camp surgeon, if you can call him that, is finally summoned. He arrives with a bundle of rags, a knife that looks like it's been used to gut pigs, and a bottle of something that might be vinegar or might be spirits. No gloves. No bedside manner. His diagnosis is always the same. Too late. You watch as he saws off a man's toe without flinching. The man screams for 2 solid minutes. then goes quiet. You're not sure if he passed out or gave up. One fringe source from a siege in Bohemia describes a man who survived the camp's illnesses by chewing garlic, sleeping in a tree, and refusing to talk to anyone. He lived. Historians still argue whether he was smart lucky or just antisocial enough to dodge death. You begin to isolate yourself, just in case. You avoid touching others, eat only what you can cook yourself, and try to boil your water, though the wood's always damp and the fire keeps going out. Despite your efforts, you still get a fever. It hits you one night like a brick. Your skin goes cold, then hot, then cold again. You sweat through your blanket. You hallucinate that the rats are singing. You hear your mother's voice, or maybe it's just someone vomiting outside. You survive the night, but barely. You crawl out into the morning light, weak, shivering, and whispering thanks to any saint who'll listen. And then someone hands you a bucket and tells you it's your turn to haul water. You try to keep a low profile in camp, but there's no escaping the traditional welcome for newcomers. Medieval hazing isn't all pranks and harmless jokes. It's a blend of humiliation, filth, and public laughter, all at your expense. It starts innocently enough. A grinning veteran with a missing ear, which he says he lost to. A cheese-related incident calls you over. "We've got a job for you, rookie." You're flattered for a split second. Maybe you'll get to stand near the cook fire or fetch fresh bread. Maybe they're even short a squire. No such luck. Your assignment, mucking out the latrines with your bare hands. You protest. You beg. You offer to trade anything. Your knife, your blanket, your dignity. They laugh and shove a battered bucket into your hands. It builds character. They say, as if character is something you grow in manure. You squelch through the mud and make your way back to that dreaded ditch. The stench is somehow worse than before, an eye-watering stew of ammonia, decay, and something that reminds you of burnt onions. Your job, scoop out the overflow and toss it into the waste pit, which is just a deeper, slightly less full ditch nearby. The logic is questionable. The experience is traumatic. As you work, a group gathers to cheer you on. They offer running commentary, rating your technique, and placing bets on how long you'll last before gagging. You do, of course. Twice. A man offers you a sprig of mint to hold under your nose. You're grateful until you realize it's already been used. Some say that during the siege of Constantinople, new arrivals were forced to sleep beside the latrine as part of their initiation. Historians still argue whether this was widespread or simply a nasty local tradition. Either way, you're not sleeping tonight. The work is dangerous as well as disgusting. One false step and you risk tumbling in. You nearly lose a boot. Twice, and come alarmingly close to slipping face first into the pit. A few of your supporters begin a chant. "One of us! One of us!" Morale building, they claim. When you finally finish, hands trembling and stomach rebelling, they hand you a greasy chunk of pork as a reward. For your trouble. They grin. You're not sure if it's actually pork, or just a test to see if you'll eat anything now. You nibble it cautiously. Afterwards, you head to the stream to try and wash off the stench. The water is icy, the soap is just sand, and someone's sheep is upstream, contributing questionable material to the flow. You do your best, but you know the smell will linger for days. On your way back, another newcomer is being led toward the latrine. You lock eyes. He nods, resigned. There's a kind of brotherhood in shared suffering, or maybe just mutual trauma. You check your hands for blisters, or worse. You vow to never, ever lose another bet in this camp. One old soldier sidles up and offers you a tippee. Keep a clove of garlic in your sock. The stink hides other stinks. Also keeps the rats out. You decide you'll try anything once, and then, just as you think you might be able to fade into the background, a horn sounds. Drill time. Move it, muck boy. Someone yells. You sigh and shuffle along, garlic in your sock, hoping your next assignment doesn't involve anything with the word pit. You've been in the siege camp long enough now that your nose should be used to it. But it isn't, not even close. The smell of the place is legendary. It clings to your skin, your clothes, your soul. It's an invisible fog of despair that wafts from every corner of camp life. And today, it's worse. There's a heat in the air that amplifies everything. The rotting meat smells more rotten. The sweat smells more sore. The breath of your fellow soldiers, a toxic blend of spoiled rations and poor dental hygiene, could drop a goat at 10 paces. But the feet. Oh, the feet. That's the real villain of the olfactory drama unfolding around you. You sit near the fire, peeling your socks off like removing old paint. Beneath, your feet resemble boiled leather, white, puffy, and covered in sores. You poke one blister and it hisses. Probably not good. Across from you, a man removes his boots and casually scrapes a chunk of something green from between his toes. Trench rot, he says proudly, like he's showing off a battle scar. You're not a real soldier till your toes fall off. You chuckle weakly and lean slightly away. The smell is so potent, even the rats avoid this part of the camp. And then you catch a whiff of something new. Something aggressive. You turn toward the source. They're burning pig fat again. It's part of the siege effort. A grotesque, sticky substance ladled into clay pots, set alight, and hurled at castle walls. Sometimes the wind shifts and the scent rolls back into camp like an angry ghost. It's a blend of sizzling bacon and demonic grease fire. Historians still argue whether burning pig fat was truly effective at weakening stone fortifications, or if it was just for psychological effect. Either way, you're pretty sure it's giving you a migraine. You stagger away from the fire in search of breathable air. No such luck. On your way, you pass the tanner's corner. They're boiling hides to patch shields and make belts. The process involves urine. Lots of it. The fumes are eye-watering, and the pile of discarded skins twitches occasionally. You don't want to know why. Back in your tent, you try to light a bit of dried sage to mask the smell. It makes things worse. Now it just smells like smoky feet. Your clothes are no better. You haven't had a change in weeks. Your tunic is stiff with sweat and filth. Your undergarments could walk off by themselves. You try to wash them, but the only clean water is reserved for drinking, and even that's murky. You rinse them in the ditch. Regret follows. You think longingly of soap, real soap, the kind that lathers. A fringe account from an Italian siege in the 14th century describes a nobleman who bathed daily with rose water. He was assassinated in his tub. You envy him. You hear the commander shout orders, his voice echoing across the camp. He's demanding someone retrieve the good firewood, which doesn't exist. He wants his tent fumigated. Again, you catch a glimpse of him later, sitting on a stool, wearing a fur-lined cloak and holding a perfumed rag under his nose. You resist the urge to throw your boot at him. Later that night, a skirmish breaks out near the palisades. Flaming arrows light up the sky. The enemy launched a quick raid, just to rattle your nerves. It works. Everyone's on edge. Afterwards, you return to your tent, adrenaline still thrumming. You lie down in your straw, wrapped in your damp, garlic-scented blanket, and inhale deeply. It still smells terrible. But now it smells like you're terrible. And that's something like progress. You don't hear the scream at first. It's muffled, buried under the sounds of arguing, hammering, and someone repeatedly trying airs and failing to tune a lute. But then it cuts through the noise again, sharp and wet. You turn your head just in time to see two men dragging a third toward the camp's surgical tent. Calling it a tent is generous. It's a patch of canvas with blood, stained blankets, and a surgeon who looks like he drinks more than he operates. He's already waiting with his tools laid out, a long knife, a hacksaw, several metal hooks, and a bowl filled with something black and sludgy. You do not ask. The wounded man is groaning, his leg shredded, likely from a splintered ballista bolt or an unfortunate fall near the siege engines. Either way, it's bad, very bad. You edge closer. Not to help, you're not trained. But because in this camp, morbid curiosity is one of the few distractions from despair, the surgeon wipes his hands on his aprons, which may once have been whited, and grabs a bottle of what might be wine. He pours it over the wound. The man howls. Then, without ceremony, the surgeon begins to stitch. The thread is thick. Too thick. You squint. It's horsehair. Someone behind you mutters, "Better than twine." You're not so sure. The man's screams grow louder as the needle punches through flesh. There is no anesthetic, just alcohol, grit, and the surgeon's indifferent hum. You can't look away. The stitching is rough and fast, like a sailor patching a sail mid-storm. One of the surgeon's assistants, a boy no older than 16, fans flies away with a tattered rag. His expression is the stuff of nightmares, somewhere between stoic and permanently traumatized. Historians still argue whether battlefield surgeons developed any meaningful techniques before the Renaissance. There are records of surprisingly advanced procedures, trepanning, wound cauterization, even crude antiseptics. But in siege camps like this, it's meatball surgery and you're the meat. The worst part is how normal it all feels. No one panics. No one gasps. Everyone just watches. Some even eat while doing so. You're suddenly very aware of your own body. Every scratch, every sore, every aching joint. You try to remember the last time you washed your hands, or changed your bandages, or sat still without wincing. You fail. Later that day, a messenger brings news more wounded are coming. A siege tower collapsed. 6 men were underneath. One is brought in with a chest wound. The surgeon doesn't even try. He whispers something, gives the man a drink, and walks away. You ask someone what the black stuff in the bowl was. Pitch, he replies. They pour it into wounds. Seals him up. Does it work? Sometimes. If the wound doesn't get hotter, you decide that you'd rather be trampled by a war horse than ever need surgery here. That night, you dream of needles made of iron, mouths full of rot, and eyes watching from under the surgeon's apron. You wake up with a shout, and then immediately try to muffle it, because people who wake the camp don't last long. One fringe account from a siege in the Balkans claims a soldier tried to operate on himself after seeing too many die in the camp infirmary. Supposedly, he survived. Historians still argue whether he existed, or whether the tale was just a cautionary story told to discourage hope. The next morning, you see the stitched man. He's still alive, leg heavily bandaged, face ghostly pale. He gives you a thumbs up. You nod back, unsure whether it's a miracle or a countdown to infection. Either way, you take smaller steps now. You walk slower, and you try, very, very hard, not to get injured. You're still limping from yesterday's close encounter with a broken cart axle when the commander's voice bellows across the camp. Siege engines to the front.
You lot! Yes, you! Get pushing!
And that's how you find yourself helping move a trebuchet. You don't know how trebuchets work. You've seen them, sure, towering wooden beasts with counterweights the size of cows. But operating one, that's above your pay grade. Unfortunately, pushing is not. So here you are, shoulder to wood, straining alongside 6 wheezing, swearing comrades trying to roll a 5-ton medieval contraption over muddy, rock-littered ground. It doesn't move. Then it does. Too fast. You lurch forward as one of the wheels slips into a rut, and the entire trebuchet groans ominously. A huge creak, then a crack. The left axle gives way with a sickening crunch, and the machine lists like a drunk nobleman at a feast. You barely jump back in time as it crashes into the ground, Dust flies. A wheel rolls off and crushes someone's helmet. Mercifully, it's unoccupied. Probably. The commander storms over, red-faced and already looking for someone to blame. His beard smells like salted meat and his breath could knock out a mule. Who let it fall? He roars, ignoring the obvious gravity. You are, of course, blamed. You try to protest. I was on the other side, sir. But he's already ranting about incompetence, carpenters, and how everything was better during the last siege. No one tells him that the last siege ended in a fiery retreat and several missing limbs. Historians still argue whether the nobles kept records of those failures on purpose or conveniently forgot to include the details. Eventually, someone suggests repairing the trebuchet. Someone else wisely points out that you lack the lumber, the tools, or the skill. The commander insists it must be done anyway, and stalks off to berate a different group. You spend the next several hours collecting wood from broken carts, snapped fences, and at one point, a latron frame. You don't mention that part. By the end of the day, your hands are full of splinters, your boots are soaked, and your clothes smell like stress. The repair is really more of a bandage, tied with rope and sealed with pitch. You have no idea if it'll hold. You test it by pulling the arm back a few feet. It creaks. It groans. You take 3 full steps back just in case. And then someone yells, "Fire!" You instinctively drop to the ground. Turns out it wasn't a command. Just someone trying to light a cooking flame. Still, you spend the rest of the afternoon twitching every time anyone raises their voice. Later, when the trebuchet is actually used, it launches a stone that promptly veers off course and lands in your own camp. A tent is flattened. No one's hurt, but a chicken escapes and is never seen again. You stare at the weapon, still smoking slightly, and whisper, "We're all doomed." A fun fact: some siege engineers in the 13th century experimented with launching diseased animal carcasses over walls as biological warfare. One chronicler described it as ingenious and deeply unpleasant. You agree with the second part. You begin to understand why so many soldiers just quit. Not desert, just emotionally quit. They go through the motions, eat, stand watch, dig ditches, push siege engines that collapse anyway, and then lie down to sleep next to the same pile of rocks they've named for company. By sundown, your arms are jelly, your back is screaming, and your head is filled with questions like, is this worth it? And could I survive as a travelling juggler? You limp back to camp. The commander passes by and doesn't look at you. That's the best compliment you've had all week. You know you're in trouble the moment the commander starts quoting Latin. He's standing on a crate near the central fire, shouting mangled phrases like bellum et fortitudo, with the gusto of a drunk theatre student and the accuracy of a soggy potato. His cloak is stained with wine, his boots haven't been polished in weeks, and his breath smells like he gargled fermented onions. This is your leader, your guiding light, the man who holds your life in his increasingly shaky hands. You try not to make eye contact, but he's pointing now, gesturing wildly, quoting Cicero, or trying to. As the great Caesar once said, he begins, pausing dramatically, Veni, vici venti. Someone near you snorts. Pretty sure that means I came, I conquered the wind. You suppress a laugh. Barely. He hears it. His gaze snaps toward you. Oh, you there? He bellows. You think this is funny? Do you know what it takes to lead a siege?
Strategy! Guts! Classical education!
You nod quickly. Yes, sir. Very windy. He seems satisfied and stumbles off to berate someone else. You exhale. By now, everyone in camp has some horror story involving the commander. He once demanded a watchtower be built using only frozen meat. He tried to have a goat promoted. He regularly forgets the names of his own officers and refers to you all collectively as Brian. To be fair, He did win a battle once, but no one's quite sure how. One theory is that the enemy commander just left out of sheer embarrassment. Historians still argue whether siege commanders were truly chosen for their tactical brilliance or simply for being nobility with access to shiny armor and loud voices. The evidence, here at least, favors the latter. Today, he decides the army needs motivation. He orders everyone to line up for a rousing speech. You shuffle into position, hungry, tired, and deeply skeptical. "Soldiers!" he bellows, arms wide. "We stand at the edge of glory." Someone coughs. "They tremble behind those walls. We shall starve them out." "We shall catapult truth and justice into their midst." Another cough. You consider pretending to faint. The speech continues for 20 full minutes. By the end, everyone's colder, no more inspired, and he's lost his place twice and repeated the phrase, "glorious perseverance," 5 times. Someone starts clapping out of pity. It catches on. You join in weakly. He bows, trips over the crate, and is helped up by 2 squires, one of whom he calls Gertrude. After the pep talk, he takes his meal roast fowl, bread with actual crust, and wine not served in a communal ladle. Meanwhile, you eat something that might have once been lentils. To make things worse, he issues a new decree. No more fires after sundown. Keeps us hidden from enemy eyes, he declares, which makes some sense, except for the fact that his tent remains lit like a festival boat, complete with torches, 2 lute players, and, on at least one occasion, a juggler. Fringe accounts from 14th century siege camps describe commanders who lived like kings while their troops boiled leather boots for soup. You're not quite there yet, but you are eyeing your belt a little suspiciously. Later that night, the commander stumbles past your tent, humming an off-key battle song. He stops, looks at your small fire, and mutters, "Put that out or the pigeons will see." You nod. "Of course, sir." You extinguish the fire and sit in the dark, cold, sore, and somehow now deeply suspicious of pigeons. This is leadership, you think. It inspires something in you. Mainly fear, confusion, and the urge to flee. They wake you up just before dawn with 5 words you never want to hear again. "You're the decoy today, lad." You sit up, bleary-eyed and immediately suspicious. "Decoy for what?" You croak. They're already strapping a makeshift banner to your back. "Just a quick walk near the front." A man explains cheerfully, tightening a knot that's cutting off circulation to your shoulder. Draw their fire a bit. Stretch your legs. Builds morale. You have questions. Many, many questions. But everyone around you is already moving on with their day. So you stand there, holding a stick with a flag on it, crudely painted, possibly upside down, and begin the slow march toward the forward palisade. You are not alone. Another unfortunate soldier is already out there, limping in slow circles like a particularly tired parade float. You wave. He waves back. It's the saddest greeting in military history. Being a decoy means you are the bait, the target, the very obvious silhouette framed perfectly against the dawn light. And with each step, you wonder if today's the day an enemy crossbowman decides to show off. From the wall, you spot movement. A flicker of metal. You freeze. Every instinct tells you to run, but you can't. That would ruin the illusion. You're told. The illusion of what? That you're an actual threat. You're holding a stick and trying not to wet yourself. An arrow whistles past your head. Not close enough to kill. Just close enough to remind you it could have. You drop to the ground on instinct. Mud splashes into your mouth. You lie there, heart pounding, half hoping they'll forget you. "Keep moving," someone shouts from behind. You get up and start walking again. Slower this time, more hunched. You try to look like a smaller target. Perhaps if you exude enough uselessness, they'll ignore you entirely. Fun fact, during the siege of Metz in 1552, it's rumoured that decoys were dressed in bright colours to draw fire away from the engineers repairing the siege engines. Some were volunteers, most were not. Historians still argue whether it was bravery or blackmail. After a few more terrifying laps, you're finally waved back. A soldier offers you a flask. You drink. It burns like regret. You ask what it is. Medicinal wine, he grins. Mossly turnips. You slump down by the fire, soaked in mud, nerves frayed. Someone claps you on the back. You're a real hero now. You smile weakly, unsure if your hands are shaking from fear, exhaustion, or the turnip wine. But it's not over. An hour later, someone hands you a bucket and says, "Round 2. This time with a dummy." You brighten. "You mean I hold a dummy instead?" The man laughs. "No, you're still the dummy." And so, you return, this time dragging a straw, stuffed mannequin meant to resemble a knight. It's lopsided and missing an arm. You think it's smiling. The defenders think it's hilarious. Someone throws a cabbage. You return a second time, and mercifully, that's the end of it for the day. Back in camp, you're a minor celebrity. Everyone's seen your performance. They nickname you Sir Target. Someone draws a crude caricature of you on a tent wall. You're holding the flag upside down, crying. You laugh along, because what else can you do? You survived. You didn't get shot, and you only swallowed one mouthful of mud. As far as siege camp stories go, this one ends better than most. Still, as you fall asleep that night, your dreams are filled with arrows, cabbage, and straw-filled dummies whispering, "We take turns now." A night falls, and with it comes a new kind of horror. The camp's version of entertainment. You're not sure what you were expecting. Songs, stories, maybe a juggler who knows more than 2 moves. What you get instead is the sound of someone shouting, "Let the games begin," followed immediately by a disturbing metallic clang and uproarious laughter. You wander toward the noise, because sleep is impossible with that racket anyway, and find a circle of men hooting around what appears to be a severed head on a stick. It's not fresh, thank goodness. Looks like it's been dried out and painted with soot to resemble a nobleman.
Head toss!
Someone explains. Closest to the barrel wins. You watch as a man winds up and hurls the ghastly thing through the air. It bounces off a rock and lands with a wet thump near a boot. Everyone cheers. The prize is a half loaf of bread and the right to boss someone else around tomorrow. Not exactly Olympic stakes, but in siege camp terms, it's prestigious. You back away slowly, trying not to look too squeamish. You nearly trip over a one-man band trying to play the lute and whistle at the same time. His instrument is out of tune, violently so, and he knows only one song, which he repeats until someone throws a fish at him. He thanks them. Tonight's headline act. A man who claims he can do impressions of enemy commanders. He mostly just yells in a fake accent and pretends to trip over his own sword. It kills. Literally, one man laughs so hard he falls backward into the firewood pile. There's no proper stage. Just a stump and a few overturned crates. One man performs a tragic monologue about a cursed helmet, but no one listens. They're too busy cheering on the arm, wrestling contest next to the latrine. A fringe account from the siege of Avignon mentions nightly performances of great absurdity, meant to dull the edge of dread. Historians still argue whether this was a coordinated effort by camp leadership or just the natural result of too many bored men with access to alcohol and skulls. As you look around, you realize something unnerving. This isn't unusual. This is normal. This is what passes for leisure here. Blood sport, bad music, gallows humor. One man juggles rat corpses. Another pretends to marry a sack of onions. Someone starts a riddle game that quickly devolves into shouting. And yet, somehow, it works. People are laughing. They're distracted. For a few hours, they forget the hunger, the cold, the rot, the endless waiting. You even find yourself smiling when a dog steals the prize head. and runs off into the night, chased by 3 limping archers. But just as quickly, the mood shifts. A new game begins. 2 truths and a lie, but with battle scars. One man rolls up his sleeve and shows a burn from a misfired torch. Another reveals a missing toe. The third points to a long scar and says he got it from a duke's daughter. Everyone boos. Someone begins singing. It's a soft, wordless tune, half lullaby, half dirge. A few voices join in. The fire pops, the laughter fades, then a scream erupts, not from the camp, but from the darkness beyond. Everyone goes silent. Weapons come out. The commander stumbles from his tent, demands to know what's happening, and is told it was probably just a fox or a deserter. Still, the fun is over. The crowd disperses. The fire dims. You return to your tent, ears ringing from off, key lute notes and shouted jokes. As you lie down, you can't help but think even here, in the depths of filth and fear, people still want to laugh, even if they have to do it with corpses, rats, and singing goats. It's the only thing keeping the madness at bay. You wake up to find your blanket missing. At first, you assume it just slid off in the night. Then you notice the distinct lack of boots by your sleeping mat, and the fact that the tiny bag of onions you'd been hoarding is nowhere to be found. Someone stole from you. Again, you sit up in the chill morning air, teeth chattering, and take stock of your meager possessions. 1 cracked bowl, 1 bent spoon, half a sock, the rest vanished. You're not even angry, just tired. The truth is, theft in the siege camp is as common as mud. Everyone's cold, everyone's hungry, and everyone's desperate. If something isn't nailed down, or even if it is, it's fair game. People swipe blankets, boots, food, soap, la rare treasure, even teeth. You've heard of a man waking up to find someone prying at his molars with a spoon. Fringe tale, maybe. Historians still argue whether such camp horror stories were cautionary exaggerations or painfully true. You trudge through camp barefoot, scanning faces. Who looks warmer than they did yesterday? Who suddenly has 2 socks? Who smells faintly of onions? The tricky part is, you can't just accuse someone. That leads to fistfights, or worse. One man called another a thief last week, and ended up eating dirt with a broken nose and a black eye. You don't want to join that club. You approach your tent mate, quiet, lanky, suspiciously not cold. "Shen my blanket." He shrugs. Check with the goat. You do not have a goat. Suspicious. You move on, trying not to shiver. But there's a growing sense of paranoia now. Every smile hides a secret. Every friendly nod could be a thief's grin. Someone bumps into you, and your first thought isn't, "Excuse me." It's, "Check your pockets." To cope, people get creative. One man sleeps inside a barrel, another ties his boots to his wrists at night. A third buries his bread in a latrine, adjacent location, claiming no one dares steal from that zone. He's right. For now. And it's not just personal belongings at risk. Food supplies are vanishing. A barrel of salted pork went missing yesterday, vanished completely. The commander blamed spies. Most of the camp suspects, he just took it for his private stash. His tent does smell suspiciously meaty. To keep morale up, punishments for theft are severe. Caught red-handed. You might lose a finger, or be tied to the latrine post for a day, while people throw turnips at you. One man had his head shaved, and was made to wear a chicken tied to his belt for a week. The chicken did not enjoy it. Neither did he. Still, theft persists. Because when you're hungry and freezing, and there's no end in sight, morals begin to feel like luxuries. You adapt. You learn to sleep with one eye open. You bury anything remotely valuable. You even rig a crude alarm, a pot lid tied to your blanket. If someone pulls it off you in the night, it clatters loudly. You test it once and accidentally wake up 6 tents. Not ideal, but effective. There's even a black market now. Someone's trading socks for garlic. Another's bartering pieces of cooked rat for clean rags. You witness a tense negotiation over a spoon. A spoon. You begin to understand the enemy behind the walls isn't your only concern. The real threat is all around you. Hunger changes people. Cold strips away manners. Desperation makes thieves of even the kindest, but you can't blame them. Not really. Because you're thinking it too. If you see an unattended crust of bread, if someone turns their back on their fire, warmed cloak, would you? Wouldn't you? The cold doesn't just arrive. It seeps, creeps, and conquers. One morning, you wake to find your breath forming little clouds inside the tent. Your fingers are stiff, your toes are numb, and the muddy ground has frozen into jagged, ankle-breaking crust. Winter has begun its siege, and unlike the enemy in the castle, it never misses. You try to flex your hands, but the joints protest. Your boots, already falling apart, are now iceboxes strapped to your legs. You shove straw inside them to keep warm. It helps for maybe 5 minutes. Then comes the wind, relentless. It slices through layers like a knife through cabbage, whistling between tents and turning every exposed patch of skin into a battlefield. Someone suggests wrapping feet in rags dipped in lard. You try it. Now you're greasy and cold. At the cook fire, the pot has frozen solid. The cook curses like a poet. He breaks the ice with a hammer and starts heating yesterday's stew again. You fish out a chunk of something that resembles a turnip, or possibly a rock. The water barrels are frozen. The horses are shivering. Even the rats look annoyed. One skitters into your tent, curls up next to you for warmth, and neither of you has the energy to object. One account from the siege of Novgorod in the 14th century describes soldiers having to break their own armour off in the morning. Historians still argue whether the frostbite numbers were exaggerated. But your fingers are going purple, and that feels pretty real. The worst part isn't the cold, it's the stillness. Nothing moves. No building, no digging, no fighting. Just waiting. Days stretch like the frozen canvas of your tent roof. No one talks much. Mouths are too numb. Jokes are rare. Laughter sounds brittle. Frostbite sets in slowly. First your fingertips sting. Then they go silent. You stop feeling them. You test your foot by poking it with a stick. No response. That's not ideal. A man next to you loses part of his ear. Just snaps off like a biscuit. He shrugs and says, "Didn't like that ear anyway." You try to keep moving. Movement is warmth. You march in place. You jog a slow circle around camp. Someone calls you mad. You smile, teeth chattering. Keeps the blood going. You say. They nod and keep huddling beside a tiny fire that seems more symbolic than useful. Clothing becomes currency. A man trades a dagger for a pair of wool socks. Another swaps 3 arrows for a fur cap. You'd offer your soul for a second blanket, but you suspect you already did back in Section 14. The commander announces that, due to dwindling firewood, rations will be cut. You're now down to 1 meal a day, mostly broth. Warm, yes, but thinner than your patience. You chew slowly, trying to fool your stomach into thinking it's satisfied. You learn tricks. Wrap your arms under your cloak like a bundle. Sleep in a curled ball. Stuff your tunic with hay. Sit near the forge. Briefly, before the blacksmith yells at you. But even with all that, your nose won't stop running. Your toes ache like they're plotting mutiny. And your lips are cracked so badly you're afraid to smile. At night, it's worse. The wind picks up. Your tent flaps like a dying bird. You lie there in the dark, wrapped in everything you own, curled around a lump of warm rock that used to be part of a catapult. You think of home. A fireplace, a bowl of soup. The simple act of being able to feel your fingers. And then you hear it, the distinct sound of teeth chattering. Not yours this time. You glance to your left. Your tent mate is curled up silent, barely moving. You nudge him, no response. You nudge harder, still nothing. You sit there, staring at his unmoving form, and suddenly the silence of winter feels heavier than steel. You sit in that silence for what feels like hours, though it's probably only minutes. The stillness of your tent mate seeps into you, coiling in your gut. You don't want to check. You don't want confirmation. But eventually, you reach out, trembling, and touch his shoulder. Cold, stiff. You pull your hand back. Someone died next to you in the night. Quietly. No screaming, no coughing, no prayers. Just slipped away. You whisper his name, though you barely knew it. Then you wrap the blanket tighter around yourself, guilt curling up beside the chill in your bones. No one in camp is shocked. Death has become mundane. A man starves, another freezes, a third gets infected from a splinter. He's taken away without ceremony, bundled in a tarp, and added to the growing burial pile near the latrine trench. Because the ground is too frozen to dig proper graves, you watch them carry him away and feel a hollow thunk in your chest. That's it. No last rites. No words. Just one less body breathing. It hits you then, more than ever there is no glory here. Just survival. A battle not of swords and siege towers, but of endurance, hanging on until something breaks, and praying it isn't you. The camp is quieter these days. Fewer fires. Fewer footsteps. The clatter of tools is rare. Even the commander's voice, once loud and ridiculous, has softened to a hoarse mutter. He rarely leaves his tent now. Word is he's sick, feverish and talking to his helmet. You don't envy him. You don't envy anyone. The rations are almost gone. Someone traded half a cloak for a strip of dried leather. You chew bark out of boredom, or maybe it's hunger. Hard to tell now. One soldier finds an old onion frozen in the dirt. He kisses it. Everyone laughs, but there's a desperation behind it. The kind that only happens when hope is scraping bottom. You hear whispers, mutiny, desertion, even surrender. Someone mentions tunneling under the enemy walls and begging to be let in. The logic. They have cheese, don't they? Historians still debate whether morale truly collapsed in the final days of long medieval sieges, or if chroniclers exaggerated for dramatic effect. But here now, you don't need a chronicler. You are living the collapse. You are the anecdote. Each day starts with aching joints, stale air, and a quiet head count. Is he still breathing? Where's the cook? Anyone seen the quartermaster? The answer to at least one of those is always no. The rats are getting bolder. You see one drag a piece of hardtack out of someone's pack while they sleep. They don't stop it. They just watch. You begin hoarding. Everyone does. You hide scraps under your cloak, chew slower, sleep with your boots on. Trust phrase. A man accused another of stealing garlic and was nearly stabbed with a tent peg. Over garlic, you lose track of the days. The sky is always grey. The wind never stops, and the castle, the enemy, still there, still closed. They never taunt you anymore. No arrows. No boiling oil. They don't need to fight. They just wait. You wonder what they eat, what songs they sing at night, if they sit by warm fires and talk about the fools in the mud outside their walls. One morning the horn blows. It sounds cracked, tired, like even it's ready to give up. A scout returns with news reinforcements are not coming. Supplies are too thin. Roads are blocked. The king is, focused elsewhere, probably throwing a feast. The commander is too sick to respond. A captain delivers the message instead. He doesn't sugarcoat it. We either break the walls or we break apart. There's silence after. Not fear, resignation. You sit in your tent that night, watching your breath rise and vanish, and wonder how long it will be before your name is forgotten in this mud, if you even left a name worth remembering. And yet, you're still here. For now, you don't expect to sleep. You never do anymore. But somehow, your eyes close, just for a bit. When they open again, it's to the sound of footsteps. Not hurried, not panicked, just footsteps. A steady, measured crunch of boots across frozen earth. You sit up, heart already speeding. Something's happening. Outside, the camp is stirring. Torches flicker like ghostly fireflies. Men are gathering near the siege towers and trebuchets. Someone whispers, "We're going in." Going in. You blink, not fully processing. Are they serious? After months of this, months of cold, disease, starvation, they're actually going to storm the walls. You scramble to your feet, fumbling for your spear and helmet. It's cracked, dented, and smells like regret. You wear it anyway. The captain speaks in clipped tones. The plan is simple. Too simple. Rush the gates while the sappers try the south wall. Hope the defenders don't burn everything before we reach the top. That's it. That's the strategy. You look around. These aren't the same men you met on day one. They're thinner now, greyer. Their eyes are hollow, movement sluggish. They don't march, they trudge. You're one of them. There's no roaring speech, no drumbeat of courage. Just the cold, the dark, and the quiet shuffling of desperate men with nothing left to lose. As the first light cracks the horizon, you advance across the field. The mud grabs your boots. Your legs ache with every step. You feel like a ghost already. Then, shouts. A blast of horns from the castle wall. Arrows whistle past. The man next to you drops. No scream. Just gone. You keep going. Flaming pitch arcs overhead, painting the sky in streaks of orange. Somewhere, a siege tower collapses. You can't hear much over the noise. Just the pounding of blood in your ears. You reach the outer trench, climb, slip. Someone grabs your hand. You don't know who. A ladder is slammed against the wall. You go up. Halfway up, a stone smashes into the man above you. He falls, dragging others with him. You press flat, holding your breath. And then, somehow you're there. You're on the wall. You don't even remember how. Just flashes, screaming, fire, steel, shadows moving in every direction. A defender lunges at you with a mace. You block with your spear, badly, and fall backward into a pile of bodies. Yours, theirs, you don't know. And then, suddenly, the sounds begin to fade. Not all at once, just distant, like the end of a thunderstorm. You open your eyes. You're on the ground again, back in camp. Or dreaming, you can't tell anymore. But it's over. One way or another, it's over. When down 300 words, and now, the fires have dimmed. The screams have long since faded into memory. What's left is silence, thick, deep, almost kind. You lie back on the damp earth, the world softening around you. The night sky above glimmers with distant stars, uncaring and ancient, watching as they always have. Cold air brushes your face, but gently now. No longer biting, no longer cruel, just a whisper. All around you, the camp settles into stillness. The creak of wood, the rustle of fabric, the soft, distant murmur of tired breath. No more shouting, no more orders. Just the quiet rhythm of those who endured, or tried. You've survived what most could not. You've felt hunger bite deeper than steel. You've watched warmth vanish, seen hope dissolve, and stood shoulder to shoulder with men who would rather die on their feet than live one more day in the mud. And still, you remained. You, the reluctant fighter, the shivering sentry, the human soul inside a walking heap of frostbitten rags. So rest now. Let your limbs grow heavy and your thoughts slow to a gentle crawl. Let the memories of cold nights and cracked bread drift far from you. Let your breath rise and fall in quiet peace. Because the siege is over, not in the stories they'll write or the songs they'll sing, but in your bones, in the stillness you've earned. Sleep now. You've made it through the worst night. You're safe here, for tonight at least.